Welcome to Behind the Lens podcast, where we talk to everyday business owners, going deep on everything from childhood experiences, trials, tribulations, as well as success habits that have shaped them as humans. So today we have Simon Gould of Orbit Marketing, who's jumping on. This is a guy who I very much respect and appreciate, like just how genuine he is. He's someone who I connected with back in Penrith, where I grew up, and he's someone who I looked up to before I finished my full-time job. He actually references a conversation that we had just as I was finishing up my full-time job. Simon is obviously in marketing and a whole range of other things, and we talk about moving and leaving Penrith. We talk about marketing. We talk about ads. We talk about experiences and building business. If you have any of those interest you, this is going to be a really cool episode. So today's episode is powered by Triple Effect Media, where we create 6 months worth of video content for YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok, and film it all in the space of 2 days. So if you're interested in finding out more about how we can script, film, edit, and as well as publish up to 3 videos weekly across all of your social media platforms, please reach out to tripleeffect.com.au. Otherwise, let's get started with the show. Welcome to today's podcast. I have the amazingly beautiful Simon joining me. So Simon is the owner, director, and chief nerd of Orbit Marketing. Simon helps service-based businesses by developing and implementing a customized 90-day marketing plan designed specifically to increase leads and sales, something that I'm really keen on diving into more about and whatnot. But the best part of Simon is he was born and bred in Penrith, somewhere that I grew up, know much about, and obviously keen to dive into a chat about marketing, business, and everything that's built the foundations around that. So welcome to the podcast, Simon.
Thanks, Alan. Mate, it's good to be here. I know that you and I have known each other for a few years now, so it's exciting to be able to get onto your podcast and have a bit of a chat.
Awesome. Yeah, this podcast, it's actually one of these things that I planned on doing it a while ago. Probably this has at least been in the works for, I'd say, over a year. And to be able to finally get it out there, it's something that sort of aligns with a lot of my values and whatnot. So to be in a position where I can really give it the time and attention and everything else, and obviously have people that are like-minded, that I admire, share similar values, it's an absolute pleasure. So thank you again for being on. Mate, let's kick off with business, actually how we first met. So I'm pretty sure, and please remind me, was it you were the president of the Penrith Chamber, is that right?
I was the president of Penrith Chamber for a couple of years, yeah, and
That's right.
I may have been in that role at the time when we met, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was the Chamber of Commerce, obviously like a business network and obviously connected with the councils and all those other things as well.
Yeah.
Mate, I guess what I'd love to understand, if you don't mind, is why did you get into something like that initially? And what, like, obviously there's leadership capability, like leadership things and a whole range of different things involved. But what had you get into that space?
Into the Chamber of Commerce? Into that space?
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, it's really important for me to be, and I know this kind of sounds really cliched, but it's really important for me to be putting things back into the community where we live. You know, as business owners, we take a lot out of the community. You know, it's how we earn our living. You know, we build relationships that we benefit from. And so I think there's always that maybe obligation to put things back into that community. And so, yeah, I was the president of the Chamber for a couple of years. I chaired a local charity in Penrith for a couple of years, the Australian Women's and Children's Research Foundation. And I've been part of committees for other things as well. And I just think it's so important to be able to sleep at night knowing that I'm taking stuff out of this area where I live, but I'm putting something back in as well. So it feels really good. There's obviously commercial benefits too. Like, let's not kid ourselves. You know, it helps build your profile, helps build your reputation. People get to know who you are. But ultimately, it really is about making sure that you're doing something. I feel like I feel like you have to get even with the world, and if you're in credit too much, then eventually something's going to go wrong. So maybe it's karma, I don't know, but I genuinely feel like when you're taking stuff out, you've got to put things back in to even the balance sheet.
I couldn't agree more. This is something, this idea of giving back is something that I only articulated very recently. So recently, or like for the last 2 years, I've joined the Surf Lifesaving Club here on the Central Coast and been volunteering my time.
Yeah.
Now, to give some context, and you'll definitely be able to resonate this, especially given, what you've just shared. I remember, I'm giving my time. I'm not getting paid for it. Most of the time, other than internally that you're through your groups and your teams and everything else, you're not really getting thanked for your time. No one's giving you a gold star at the end or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I completely resonate. At the time, I was sort of like, well, I had this feeling of wanting to give back and things like that. And to me, the most valuable thing that I can give is my time, because it's we've obviously run a business and all those other things. And so I completely resonate with what you're saying with wanting to do something and give back. And it obviously, like you said, there's obviously commercial benefits and all those other things, but it does make sense and everything else. So as I introduced you at the start, and I'd love to get, I guess, a little bit more context around Orbit Marketing and what you do there and whatnot. But you obviously run a digital marketing agency. You do a whole range of different things on social media, marketing, paid ads, and a whole range of other things. But do you want to give us a little bit of context as to what Orbit Marketing is and how did you get started?
Yeah, so Orbit Marketing, as you quite rightly point out, is a digital marketing agency. So we work with local businesses to help them grow their online presence, to help them grow their leads, to help them grow their sales. And we do that in a really structured way. We work with the business owner or whomever it is that's doing the marketing there to get an understanding of who it is they help and how they help those people, put together messaging, put together offers, put together advertising campaigns that are specifically designed to increase that brand awareness, generate leads, nurture those leads, and get them into a state where the business owner can convert that person into a sale. And it's not rocket science. There's a really structured process in order to do that. But in terms of how we ended up here, my background's marketing. I studied marketing. I graduated from the University of New England 100 years ago with a commerce degree, with majors in marketing and human resources. I spent a while in the recruitment industry, which is really interesting. When human beings are your product, there's that really blurry line between what you should and shouldn't do. And it kind of got to a point where I thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be buying and selling people, because that's really what it felt like. So left that, went into advertising, spent some time with News Corp in their motorcycle magazine division, which for a motorcyclist like me was awesome. It was a dream job. And spent quite a bit of time there until News decided to sell off their magazine division. And so, that meant looking for a new job. Spent some time with the car sales network on their bike sales website, independent publishing house, some other advertising stuff. And then within about 6 weeks, my wife and I both found ourselves out of work. And we're like, what just happened? She was in a really good, stable job with the engineering company, and I was a state sales manager with an out-of-home advertising business. And we're like, how do we both end up unemployed, and how do we pay the mortgage? And we've been mucking around with this idea of our own business for a while. And it was Jo. She went, well, we've got nothing to lose. It's now or never. And we started Orbit Marketing. That was in 2017. We've now got, a team of people. We've got a bunch of fantastic clients who we work with. We both work in the business full time. We've recently, done the great migration out of suburbia to the beautiful beaches of Foster. And we're running our agency, and life's good.
Awesome. I love that. And just talking about Jo's got a bit of a photography background. Is that right? Well, that's something I've observed anyway.
It's actually me. When we were looking at starting
a
business, yeah, I know, right? If you see Jo, she's got the tattoos and the bright red hair, and she looks like the creative one, but she's our systems and processes, and I'm the creative part of the team, which is really unexpected for people. When we were looking at starting a business, it was going to be a photography business because that was my passion and that's what I wanted to do. But it just kind of morphed into marketing because people assumed, oh, well, if Simon started a business, it's probably a marketing business. And we had people ask us for help with marketing. And eventually I just sort of thought, why am I fighting this? Like, let's just go with it. And it's been the best decision, that we ever made, was to move into that space. Like I said, it was my background. We still do photography for some of our clients. We do a lot of stuff for their social media content. But I don't do weddings anymore. I do the odd corporate event. So I've got one that I love, which I'll just mention, which is the annual Youth Off the Streets Lipstick Lunch, which is a big fundraiser for youth off the streets. And I basically give my time to them to shoot that every year, photograph that event every year. But now it's really just for our social clients.
Yeah. No, beautiful. Awesome. And look, obviously, there's a lot to sort of dive in there, but what I'm keen to learn more about is, obviously you've given us like a little bit of a background and story and all those other things. There's, as you know, and you do not need me to tell you this, there's obviously many different marketing agencies who are out there, digital marketing agencies who probably offer similar things and whatnot. And I guess what I'm really keen to hear your opinion on, how do you stand out as Orbit Marketing? Like, what is it that is either your USP, or how do you make sure that you really stand out to who it is that you're looking to work with?
Yeah, look, I think it's that structured plan that we work towards. It's not just an advertising campaign. There's actually a systematic process where we start building awareness of the business, building awareness of the brand, building awareness of whatever those offers might be. Then we move into a lead generation phase where we take that, market awareness that we've created, or that brand awareness that we've created. We use that in order to generate leads, which aren't always going to be people who are ready to buy right now. That's probably one of the biggest things when we're talking to business owners, is you need to be prepared to invest this time in building a really solid foundation before things can accelerate. And so we move into that lead generation phase. It's really important to make sure that you include good lead nurturing, email, SMS, messenger, if you can include that in that lead nurturing as well, before we make really specific offers in order to convert those people into customers. And so, we sit down and we plan out that 90-day campaign at the start of every client relationship. That's where it comes from. And so that's a point of difference for us. Now, there's a lot of marketing agencies out there, as you say, and there's a lot of really good ones. We're by no means the only agency that can do that and can get results for people at all. So the other thing I think business owners need to look at is, can they work with the agency? Like, get on a phone call, have a chat with them, talk about stuff in general. The conversation that you and I are having, we're talking about marketing, but we're kind of getting to know one another and feeling each other out. And I think that's really important, because there's going to be points during that relationship where things are fantastic and everything's great. And there's going to be points where things are not so great either. The leads just aren't coming, or the offers aren't resonating and converting. And so it's really important that the business owner and the marketing agency can work together. So there's got to be that vibe there. You've got to vibe with that person. And so I think that's one of the biggest things is we always want to make sure that we've got that relationship with the client. That means we can have those tough conversations when they need to be had, and they're productive ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So obviously you've got a system, you've got a process. There's a little bit of like you're sort of talking about, it's almost like you're building and nurturing that relationship over a course of a period of time. And you're always either nurturing or directly calling out the next step in the process and whatnot as well.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So let's take a little bit of a turn, because I'm really keen to hear, obviously, there's one big similarity that we both have is we obviously both grew up in Penrith, and we now find ourselves closer to the coast, and whatnot. I'm keen to hear your thoughts as to why you made that shift and move from Penrith to now Foster. For those who don't know geographically where Penrith and Foster is, it's basically is it roughly about 4.5 hours from Sydney, north of Sydney, or three and a bit hours north of Sydney?
Yeah, it's about 3.5 hours north of Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, what had you just pick up your life, obviously growing up in Penrith, and move it all to Foster?
Yeah, look, we, Joe, my wife and I, we always loved the beach. I mean, you know, you're Aussie and you grow up around it, and it's such a big part of our life and our culture. Who doesn't love the beach, right? And we would holiday there. Joe's a Central Coast girl, so she grew up near the beach. And our plan was always to retire to the beach. And then, you know, COVID shut the world down and it turned everything upside down. And one of the positives was that we all realised that we can work from anywhere, especially Al, as you know, in our industry. You know, we can, as long as you've got a laptop or internet connection, you can pretty much run your business from anywhere. And, you know, Joe just looked at me one day. She said, why are we waiting? Why are we going to retire to the beach? Let's just do it now. Right in the middle of COVID. It was a challenging exercise, let me tell you.
Yes.
Western Sydney was right in lockdown when we bought the place that we're living in here, and we couldn't come up to have a look at it. Things up here, we'd already sold our house. We put it on the market. It's sold within 2 weeks. The property market was crazy. We had to buy something up here. We couldn't get up here to have a look because we were in lockdown. And so we didn't actually see this house until the day before settlement. We were able to find a place that would let us do our isolation up here. It was a holiday park that was basically empty. So we stayed there, and we finished our ISO the day before settlement. So we got to have a look at the house. But you know, the motivating force was, let's do it now while we're young enough to enjoy it. Let's go and live that coastal life now and not wait until we retire.
Wow. I didn't realize, because that's right. Like, because Sydney was in lockdown, but obviously Foster, they were still running free, if you will.
Yeah.
That's why you had to do that lockdown, is you coming out of the Sydney area.
Yeah, and because and Sydney, you know, had issues, but like it was sort of June of 2021, and Western Sydney, like COVID was exploding in Western Sydney, and there were parts of it, including bits of Penrith, that were in like a hard lockdown. I don't know if you remember, but, you know, certain postcodes, certain suburbs, you weren't allowed out of your suburb. And unless, you know, certain things like you had to do it for work, you're an essential service, or you were moving. And so we could leave for that, but we couldn't just sort of, you know, come up for the day and have a look around or view a property or something. You know, we had to kind of make that move, find a place that would let us isolate for 2 weeks. So it was really challenging. Yeah, it was really challenging.
There's a whole rabbit hole of questions that I'd like to ask from here, but I think in summary, it feels like it potentially feels a little bit excessive of what we had to do back then to where we sort of ended up, doesn't it? I think getting some nods. So,
like in retrospect, you know, you have at the time, it didn't seem that like it was frustrating, but you kind of got it. You know, lives are at stake and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In retrospect, you look back and think, man, that was really draconian. Like that was hardcore restrictions that they were putting on people. And the fact is, we're still like we just came back from a trip overseas, and people are still wearing masks, and there's still COVID testing. Like little tents all around the streets in this city where we were, and it's still here. Like it hasn't gone away. And I think we've kind of just gone, well, you know what, screw it. We're going to have to live with it now. So let's just get on with our lives, and we are. Yeah,
absolutely. And everyone's got to do what's best for them and everything else as well. But very, very interesting. So obviously you've made that move. It sounds like obviously you're really enjoying it and whatnot. And the reason I ask is because obviously we made the move to the Central Coast from Penrith. So geographically an hour and a half north of Sydney. And one of the big reasons is exactly right. Like we spend a lot of our holidays around the beaches and things like that. And exactly right. Like we never sort of said we want to retire. You know, it was just more so, I think Jess my wife has some family up here, and we just made it work and happen. But yeah, absolutely right. Like prior to so it was 4 and a bit years ago at the beginning of 2019 that we officially started this business. But prior to that, I was still, you know, doing work and whatnot. And I was working from home, working with clients all around, or at the time in New South Wales, in Sydney and Brisbane, all from my little home office in Penrith. And I was able to service that, plus do a full-time job. I was working for the Commonwealth Bank remotely. And that then told me that, it was like, it worked out that I finished up with the Commonwealth Bank before I moved, but were making the plans to move with the intention of me working still for the Commonwealth Bank, but it just worked out that I managed to get out of my full-time role and everything else as well. So
I remember having a coffee with you at a little place in Penrith, and I think it might have been just after you might have handed in your notice at the Commonwealth Bank, but maybe hadn't even finished up there yet. And I just remember how different the expression on your face was, like how different you carried yourself. It was clear what a massive step that was for you, and what a good step that was for you. Like, to step out of that and go, you know what, I'm doing this full time. It was awesome.
When was that?
Can
you remind me?
We had a coffee at Percy Plunkett.
That's right.
We had a coffee
yes.
We had a coffee at Percy Plunkett, and we were just talking marketing and stuff like that. And you walked in and sat down, and there was just this grin on your face, and I thought, I don't know what's going on. And you told me, you said, I've given him my notice. Like, I've handed my notice in, and I'm leaving, and I'm going to be doing this full time. I remember that.
Yeah.
That was, and look at where you are now, and what you've been able to do.
Yeah. In
your own home, and it's brilliant.
Yeah. No, well, thank you for bringing that up. It was a massive, massive achievement for me. But I think above and beyond being able to exit out of my full-time job, it was the self-belief that I'd been able to do, to have. Even I don't know how much I told you about the contract that I'd just gotten from the real estate agent to be able to make that shift and move and all this other stuff. But if you will, this is the way that I see it, and it's a very deep and spiritual way of seeing things, but I manifested an outcome purely through just taking action and doing repetitive things to make sure that I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, on the other side. I just knew that this role, whilst it was supporting my mortgage, my kids, and all the other things that I had, it wasn't fulfilling enough for me to continue to be there.
Yeah.
And it was really good to connect with you. And again, the reason I love connecting with people like yourself is you get to, at the time you were you're still running the same business as far as I remember. And just being able to have pure focus and flexibility around that work, and being financially stable enough to focus on the things that you wanted to and needed to at that time as well. That freedom, that mental freedom, is something that I think I was chasing and looking for, but knew that I was doing my time and building something up so that I could do it. And obviously there was lots and lots of obstacles once I finally left, but that was a really, really cool time. I think more so because of the self-belief and everything else as well.
Yeah, I think...
Hello, amazing human. This is just a quick, brief message to remind you to share the love. And what do I mean by sharing the love? What I mean is, if you know someone who might get value from this episode or from this interview, make sure you share this episode with them. Also, if you are enjoying this interview and may enjoy other interviews like it, make sure you hit the subscribe button or follow button on whichever platform you're listening or watching on. And lastly, if you're really enjoying this episode, if you really want to share the love, make sure you leave a rating. A positive rating with lots of love is much appreciated. Otherwise, let's get back to the show.
Having the freedom to focus on the things that you need to do is important. But the other thing I think that drives success when you make a decision like that is that really sort of that clarity of focus that comes with knowing that there's no alternative now. I'm 100% reliant on this business for everything, and I have to make it work. I once heard it I once heard it described, starting a business described as jumping off a cliff and building an aeroplane on the way down. And it's 100% right, mate. There's no choice. You get this
Correct.
right, or there's a big splat at the bottom. And that's what it's like. And I think as long as you've got that safety net of the job, then you can build your business, but it's never going to happen the way that it happens when you make that decision to jump. You've just got to jump.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's like, even if you do splat, it's okay. Like, it's okay to fall in the water, climb your way back up, or climb and build something back up to where it needs to be. But because I know for me, I did that multiple times. Like, I don't know if I ever told you about the iPhone app. Did I tell you about the iPhone app that I built and absolutely sucked at?
No.
All right. I'm just going to share a little story about the iPhone app, right? So this was going back about 10 years ago, maybe somewhere around that point. And there was an app that so with a graphic design background, I designed an app called the Fire app. And this app was a goal setting app. And so it was derived from this. I was really into Tony Robbins at the time. And so doing all this goal setting and all this other stuff. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to use my graphic design skills. The latest thing is building an app, an iPhone app or whatever for your smartphone. I'm going to try my hand at it. There's a really cool guy in the area. His name's Brendan. He's still in this area, but I think his company and whatnot's evolved. But anyway, he's from Penrith as well.
Yeah,
and
as all the good
so I
people
connected with this guy. Yeah, absolutely. So connected with Brendan. He sort of helped me to understand what I could do coding wise and all these other things. And so we got to it. Like, I designed all the screens and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Brendan and his team built out the app. Now, in saying that, I'll step back and say that to have Brendan and his team work on it, I had to come up with $20,000.
Wow.
Right, $20,000. And I didn't have it at the time. So instead of talking to my wife like a good, responsible husband would, I went and got the loan first, and then asked for forgiveness after. Now, that was not a really good plan of attack with communication and building a really strong relationship. But it's sort of, you sort of get the sense of my passion and everything else. Anyway, we did this app. I launched it. It was sort of like, there was a freemium version. So there's a free version, and then there's a paid version for $1 something.
Yeah.
And out of all the investment and all the other stuff that I did, I made a total of $14 back.
Wow.
And it sucked. Like, yeah. And so after I'd launched it, I then realized that I need to come back and do all the coding I need to work on the concept first, right? Come back to marketing strategies and things like that. I hadn't even thought about the marketing side of it, who my target audience is, what are the pain points, things like that.
Is this solving a problem that needs to be solved? Is there enough of a market of people who are going to pay for this? Yeah.
Yeah. The problem I solved was I wanted to create an app.
Yeah.
And I wanted to use the app. Yep. Yeah. So it was good for me. It wasn't good for anyone else. And that was the problem. And so the long and short of it is that app, like, I then tried to do some crowdfunding. I sucked at it. No one wanted to give me money because I just fucked up my own $20,000. And I learned a really, really valuable lesson there about testing a concept. Later on as well, I found out I could have done a proof of concept for could have done a test concept for $200, had people test it and give me live feedback and all these other things, right? So, but the long and short of it is, there is no way that moment where we were sitting at the coffee shop and I'm telling you about how I've just left my full-time job, there is no way I get to that point without,
that experience
sucking. And that is, for me, that's my real life university degree.
Yeah.
And so this is going to segue into my question to you, Simon. Is there anything that you have that you've really sucked and failed on that has led you and helped you to build success into where you are today?
Oh, look, there's been a few little things along the way. We've maybe not to the kind of extent that you did with the app, but we tried a couple of different businesses along the way. You know, at one point we decided that we were going to go into the t-shirt business, which I think every good entrepreneur probably does at some point in their life. And we created designs and we printed shirts, and we even had, you know, the really cool little labels printed to stitch into the background and had them all custom stitched in. And I don't remember what we spent on it, but at the time it felt like a lot of money. And, you know, similar to you, the only people who bought anything was our family and our friends, and that was it. And I think we ended up chucking out, you know, a couple of hundred t-shirts like 10 years later when we realized we had to let go of this and throw it away. So, you know, we've been there, we've tried things that haven't worked, and every single day we try things that don't work. And I reckon one of the biggest fears it's important to overcome if you're starting a business is to learn that, like you said, if you splash in the water, it's actually okay. In fact, it's better than okay, because there's always going to be something really good you can learn out of that. You know, I don't know who said it, fail fast and fail forward. It's a real thing. You know, when we launch a campaign now, it's based on a whole lot of good information. It's based on solid planning. It's based on strategy, but there's no guarantee it's going to work. And it's kind of exciting to see what happens. And if it doesn't, what can we learn from that to make it better and move forward? So, yeah, look, there's always little things along the way. There's always things that you try that don't work. And there's always something to learn out of that.
I love that. Fail fast. And just to reiterate your point, like coming back to the marketing talk and everything else, on like even within our specific business, the marketing and ads that we were running for ourselves between July to November last year went absolutely bonkers. They were like over exceeding our expectations, right? Great. We tried the exact same approach this year, and it's completely different. Yeah. And it was so interesting seeing that. Yeah. And like you said, it's exciting when that happens, because at the edge of those failures and those things are optimizations. Yeah. And what's really interesting now is the pivots that we've made. We've actually, like, if we're just looking at results for our Facebook ads and things like that, what we're now seeing is a lower cost per lead, but a higher return on ad spend, not only cash collected, but also future revenue and a whole range of other things. And that wouldn't have happened, like, and even, if you will, some more qualified clients, because we had to go a little bit deeper on specific niches and things like that. And so I'm sure you'd have 1,001 of these examples, but is there anything that you can sort of share around, like, and you don't necessarily obviously have to put names and things like that, but are there any examples that you can share where you've had to make some pivots and changes and you've had some really good outcomes as a result of that?
Look, I think there's very few, if I can say, there's probably only one campaign I can think of, you know, that's generating solid results that hasn't had to change in that period of time. And what I will say is that the issues that people are facing, the challenges that people have got, and what's important to them has changed so dramatically in the last 2 to 3 years, that if you've got something that you're doing now that's working, that was working 2 years ago, you're really going to be in the minority. So it's important to go back to your client persona, and I think that's probably what you were alluding to when you talked about going a little bit deeper on particular niches. Go back to your client persona, talk to your customers, talk to the people that used to be customers, and find out what's important to them now, because it's often going to be very different to what was important to them a couple of years ago. And and so you'll need to change your offers. One example was a client who was running a webinar funnel, right? So they were using branding and awareness to create warm audiences, retargeting those warm audiences with a, hey, sign up for a free webinar. And it was working really well, and they were getting really cost-effective webinar registrations. And then, you know, suddenly within a period of about 3 months, they stopped getting those webinar registrations, and they just didn't really understand what was going on. And so we spent a little bit of time digging a little bit deeper and trying to understand the client persona a little bit more. And what had changed in the lives of some of these people were added responsibilities, more stress, more pressure, because of increased costs of living. And so they were feeling really time poor, whereas previously they were a little bit more relaxed and they could invest an hour in a webinar. But now they're like, well, I just haven't got that hour in my day. I'm so busy trying to play catch up and do other things to make my business work that I haven't got the time for that webinar. So the free offer, right, the lead magnet, if you want to call it that, the free offer was changed from a webinar registration to a simple infographic with a process on it. And suddenly the downloads were great, really cost-effective leads, followed up by video sales letter to get onto a call, and they were back. But that webinar that had worked really effectively previously just wasn't working anymore because one little thing had changed. People were just too stressed and too busy to be able to dedicate the time to a webinar. So if you're doing something now that was working 2 years ago, then I take my hat off to you because that's incredible because so much has changed. Yeah. But if you're finding that whatever you were doing now isn't working, then it could be the fact that your offer now isn't relevant to how people are feeling. So go back to your client persona, like you said, Al, dig a bit deeper and try out some new offers.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the next thing I'd love to talk about is, I guess, your values, right? So it's not something that I don't even think we've ever had this conversation, but just your presence, your energy, you're very chill, very well-spoken and very confident with your delivery and everything else. I'm assuming has to come from the confidence that you have in the abilities that you not only have in business, but you're a good, genuine person as well, Simon. Let's both admit it. And so what I'd love to now understand, if it's okay, is what are some of the values that you have in business or are just super critical to how you work and operate with your clients?
Yeah, thank you, mate, for saying that. I really appreciate that. And it's definitely something that we put a lot of emphasis on and a lot of value on just in our lives, but in our business as well, is openness and honesty and transparency and looking at a client campaign as though it was ours, as though it was our money. We work with small and medium-sized businesses. We don't work with corporates. We don't work with guys who've got $1 million allocated to marketing, and if they burn it, that's okay. We work with small businesses who are like, well, this is a lot of money for me, and I need to see a return on that. And so, one of our values is to make sure that we're being transparent, to make sure that we're being open, and to make sure that we're being really honest with people, not just in what we tell them, but in what we do. We've always, in every single campaign that we run, and, we've had campaigns that haven't worked. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Sometimes it doesn't work. It's advertising, it's marketing. Sometimes it just doesn't get the result that you want. But we never go to bed feeling like we haven't done absolutely everything that we could. And I think that's what gives me the confidence to say to people, yeah, we can do this for you, because we know that we will turn over every single stone to get to that result as if it was our own money. Probably even more so. You feel more responsibility when you're spending someone else's money. When it's your own, you go, well, if I burnt that, I burnt that. But when it's someone else's money, you've really got to be completely invested in getting them the outcome.
Absolutely. And I agree. And I think that sort of comes back to, I guess, if you will, even just having the integrity to know that I want to operate this campaign. I want to work on, with this person in the same way that I would want to see it. And I love that. Awesome. Look, is there, I guess the last thing I'd love to understand more about, and what I typically like to ask, is there anything that happened during your childhood or anything that you were doing as a child or during your teenage years or anything like that, that you just knew that marketing was going to be a fit one way or another with where you are now?
Look, I blame my mum. I blame my mum. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's a statute of limitations on child exploitation, but hopefully there is. because like my mum, and this is partly where I think my community mindedness comes from too. My mum started the Save the Children Fund chapter in Penrith. Like it didn't exist in Penrith, and my mum decided we need to do something, and she started that. And it used to raise funds by having a table outside. I think it was the National Australia Bank at that point in High Street in Penrith, which now might be an electrical store. And when I was really young, and we're talking like 6, 7, 8 years old, I would sell raffle tickets, and people just couldn't like say no to a little kid asking them to buy raffle tickets. And I always sold more raffle tickets than everybody else. And so, and Mum knew that too, which is why she dragged me down there to sell raffle tickets. And so,
to make sure.
And then, so there was that. And then, we did the stereotypical lemonade stand out the front of the house, and the local kids, like when I was growing up, there was a whole bunch of young families in the area, and so the mums always gave the kids, I don't remember how much it was at the time, probably 20 cents, to go and buy a glass of lemonade, from the lemonade stand. So there was always something little like that going on, and so I guess it was destiny. Like I was always going to do something that was entrepreneurial. It was always going to be in sales or marketing to some extent, and it took a while, but yeah, here we are.
That's amazing. I like that. The top salesperson for the raffle tickets, and slowly led to where you are in sales and marketing.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
I think when you're that age, you don't have any fear of rejection at that age. So you just walk up to people in the street, whomever. Can you imagine doing that now? Can you imagine a kid like at that age being unleashed into the public now? It just would happen. But it was. Yeah. But I remember those times really fondly. It was great fun.
Yeah. No, look, and I can actually resonate probably more so. It's a little bit different from the way that I resonate. I still I grew up in church, and my parents took us to a Christian church and whatnot. And by the time I reached my teens, I was in a youth group, and I always seen that the kids who brought their friends to youth group always got recognized, and always it was almost like some sort of significance was placed on, hey, this person brought these many people, well done, good to have, welcome, all this other stuff. And so for me, my love language, if you don't know what the love languages are, there's a really good book called The Love Languages. Highly recommend checking it out. But my love language is words of affirmation. So someone saying something really nice about someone, especially to a wider audience, which I have, deep impact values and all those other things, I was like, okay, so this works. So the way that I get paid in recognition is by bringing people. And so unfortunately, I turned into a little bit of Bible bashing when I was younger, but it's that's one of the things that sort of taught me a little bit about that sales and whatnot, about almost like a numbers game. I look back at it now and realize how fucked up it was. Like that thinking of just bringing getting numbers in and whatnot, but it really does contribute to goals and outcomes and drives and values and the way that people work and operate as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we can't underestimate the importance of those formative years and the experiences that we have.
Yeah.
And, it's good that you were able to kind of look back and analyze that and say, well, some of that wasn't quite right, or didn't quite work for me. But there's other things that you can take out of it, and you do move forward within your life and in your business, and they serve you really well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Always got to appreciate where you come from, no matter obviously, I would not do things the same way, but I appreciate the Alan and the things that I learned during that period of time, just like you'd appreciate, the fact that you were the top raffle selling person, which has led you on to where you are now as well. So
completely, all of those,
Simon, thank you.
All those experiences,
Sorry, you go.
All of those experiences have turned us into the people that we are. So, whether they were good experiences or bad experiences, if we survived them, you can't regret them, because that's what's turned us into who we are today.
I couldn't agree more. All right. Well, look, this has been a really, really cool chat. Been a really good way to sort of catch up and check in and whatnot. If someone's interested in either finding out more about Orbit Marketing or even reaching out to you directly and having a chat or whatever the case is, what's the best way to get in touch?
Email, website, orbitmarketing.com.au, simon@orbitmarketing.com.au. Check out our Facebook page, which is Orbit Marketing Oz. They're probably the best channels.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on today. Is there any final quotes or anything else you want to leave us with before we finish it all?
Not so much quotes, but I think, for anybody that's out there and they're thinking about either starting their business or they're thinking about starting their marketing campaign or they're thinking about starting something, my advice is to just start. You and I have talked about it today. When we took either that decision to take the plunge or we found ourselves in that situation, it's amazing what you can achieve when you feel like you have to. So, don't wait. Do it now. Whether it's, even if it's our moving to the beach, just get on and do it.
I couldn't agree more. Even you're talking about shifting your life. It sounds really big when you say you've got to shift your entire life, but there's things that you don't have to do. And there's things that you can sort of work out along the way. Even, we moved up and one of the biggest concerns was that Ruby, our daughter, who's now 8, she was about to start school, needed to find a daycare center, and all those other things. And it's the same for Oscar actually. And they're all little things that you can sort of tick off, and you just need to list your priorities because everything else can work out. My parents still live in Penrith and we come to visit them. We just make the trip, especially the North Connect's now in place. We just make the trip down. It's not that far for us, especially. But it's all workable. Like you mentioned, especially now in business, just depending on what you do, obviously. There's a lot of opportunities online now to be able to do business and operate from that place as well. So,
and it could be, you're
great
right.
finishing point.
Yeah, you're right. It could be something as simple as moving your business online. And I love that expression, choose your hard. Picking up your life and moving it, it's hard. But staying where you are and being miserable, that's hard too. So, which hard would you prefer? Pick one.
I love that. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Simon. Thank you so much for spending some time. And see you on the next one.
Mate, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for catching up.
That is the end of today's podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, as I mentioned before, make sure you share the love, share it with a friend, family member, or otherwise. Make sure to give us a subscribe or even a positive rating on the various platforms. And if you're interested in finding out more about Triple Effect and who we are, what we do, head to tripleeffect.com.au. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next interview.